The 12 Chairs by Ilf and Petrov, Chapter 29, The Author of the Gavrilliad. As Madame Gritsatsuyev was leaving the block of offices, the more modest ranks of employees were beginning to arrive at the House of the Peoples. There were messengers, in-and-out girls, duty telephonists, young assistant accountants, and state-sponsored apprentices. Among them was Nikifor Lapis, a very young man with a sheep's head haircut and a cheeky face. The ignorant, the stubborn, and those making their first visit to the House of the Peoples entered through the front entrance. Nikifor Lapis made his way into the building through the dispensary. At the House of the Peoples he was completely at home and knew the quickest ways to the oases where, under the leafy shade of departmental journals, royalties gushed from clear springs. First of all, Nikifor went to the snack bar. The nickel-plated register made a musical sound and ejected 3 checks. Nikifor consumed some yogurt, having opened the paper-covered jar, then a cream puff which looked like a miniature flower bed. He washed it all down with tea. Then Lapis leisurely began making the round of his possessions. His first visit was to the editorial office of the monthly sporting magazine Gerasim and Mumu. Comrade Napernikov had not yet arrived, so Nikifor moved on to the Hygroscopic Herald, the weekly mouthpiece by which pharmaceutical workers communicated with the outside world. "Good morning," said Nikifor. "I've written a marvelous poem." "What about?" asked the editor of the literary page. "On what subject?" "You know, Trubetskoy, our magazine." To give a more subtle definition of the essence of the Hygroscopic Herald, the editor gestured with his fingers. Trubetskoy Lapis looked at his white sailcloth trousers, leaned backward, and said in a sing-song voice, "The Ballad of the Gangrene." "That's interesting," said the hygroscopic individual. "It's about time we introduced prophylaxis in popular form." Lapis immediately began declaiming, "Gavrila took to bed with gangrene. The gangrene made Gavrila sick." The poem went on in the same heroic iambic tetrameter to relate how, through ignorance, Gavrila failed to go to the chemist's in time and died because he had not put iodine on a scratch. "You're making progress, Trubetskoy," said the editor in approval, "but we'd like something a bit longer, do you understand?" He began moving his fingers, but nevertheless took the terrifying ballad, promising to pay on Tuesday. In the magazine Telegraphists' Week, Lapis was greeted hospitably. "A good thing you've come, Trubetskoy. We need some verse right away, but it must be about life, and life, no lyrical stuff. Do you hear, Trubetskoy? Something about the everyday life of post office workers, but at the same time, do you get me?" "Only yesterday I was thinking about the everyday life of post office workers, and I concocted the following poem. It's called The Last Letter. Here it is. Gavrila had a job as a postman. Gavrila took the letters round." The story of Gavrila was contained in 72 lines. At the end of the poem, Gavrila, although wounded by a fascist bullet, managed to deliver the letter to the right address. "Where does it take place?" they asked Lapis. It was a good question. There were no fascists in the USSR and no Gavrilas or members of the Post Office Union abroad. "What's wrong?" asked Lapis. "It takes place here, of course, and the fascist is disguised." "You know, Trubetskoy, you do better to write about a radio station." "Why don't you want the postman?" "Let's wait a bit. We'll take it conditionally." The crestfallen Nikifor Trubetskoy Lapis went back to Gerasim and Mumu. Napernikov was already at his desk. On the wall hung a greatly enlarged picture of Turgenev with a pince-nez, waders, and a double-barrel shotgun across his shoulders. Besides Napernikov stood Lapis's rival, a poet from the suburbs. The same old story of Gavrila was begun again, but this time with a hunting twist to it. The work went under the title of The Poacher's Prayer. Gavrila lay in wait for rabbits, Gavrila shot and winged a doe. "Very good," said the kindly Napernikov. "You have surpassed Antich himself in this poem, Trubetskoy. Only there are 1 or 2 things to be changed. The first thing is to get rid of the word prayer." "And rabbit," said the rival. "Why rabbit?" asked Nikifor in surprise. "It's the wrong season." "You hear that, Trubetskoy? Change the word rabbit as well." After transformation, the poem bore the title The Poacher's Lesson, and the rabbits were changed to snipe. It then turned out that snipe were not game birds in the summer either. In its final form, the poem read, "Gavrila lay in wait for sparrows, Gavrila shot and winged a bird." After lunch in the canteen, Lapis set to work again. His white trousers flashed up and down the corridor. He entered various editorial offices and sold the many-faced Gavrila. In the cooperative flute, Gavrila was submitted under the title of The Aeolian Recorder. Gavrila worked behind the counter. Gavrila did a trade in flutes. The simpletons in the voluminous magazine The Forest as It Is bought a short poem by Lapis entitled On the Verge. It began like this. Gavrila passed through virgin forest hacking at the thick bamboo. The last Gavrila for that day worked in a bakery. He was found in a place in the editorial office of The Cake Worker. The poem had the long and sad title of Bread, Standards of Output, and One Sweetheart. The poem was dedicated to a mysterious Hina Chlek. The beginning was as epic as before. Gavrila had a job as baker. Gavrila baked the cakes and bread. After a delicate argument, the dedication was deleted. The saddest thing of all was that no one gave Lepus any money. Some promised to pay him on Tuesday, others said Thursday or Friday in 2 weeks' time. He was forced to go and borrow money from the enemy camp, the place where he was never published. Lepus went down to the second floor and entered the office of the Lathe. To his misfortune, he immediately bumped into Persitsky the Slogger. "Ah!" exclaimed Persitsky, "Lapsus!" "Listen," said Nikifor Lepus, lowering his voice. "Let me have 3 rubles. Gerasim Mumu owes me a pile of cash." "I'll give you half a ruble. Wait a moment. I'm just coming." And Persitsky returned with a dozen employees of the Lathe. Everyone joined in the conversation. "Well, how have you been making out?" asked Persitsky. "I've written a marvelous poem. About Gavrila, something peasanty. Gavrila plowed the fields early. Gavrila just adored his plow." "Not about Gavrila, that's a potboiler," said Lepus defensively. "I've written about the Caucasus. Have you ever been to the Caucasus? I'm going in 2 weeks. Aren't you afraid, Lepus? There are jackals there." "Takes more than that to frighten me. Anyway, the ones in the Caucasus aren't poisonous." They all pricked up their ears at this reply. "Tell me, Lepus," said Persitsky, "what do you think jackals are?" "I know what they are. Leave me alone." "All right, tell us then if you know." "Well, they're sort of like snakes." "Yes, of course, right as usual. You think a wild goat saddle is served at the table together with the spurs." "I never said that," cried Trubetskoy. "You didn't say it, you wrote it. Napernikov told me you tried to palm off some doggerel on Gerasim and Mumu supposed to be about the everyday life of hunters. Honestly, Lepus, why do you write about things you've never seen and haven't the first idea about? Why is the Peg Noir in your poem Canton in evening dress? Why?" "You Philistine," said Lepus boastfully. "Why is it that in your poem The Bodiani Stakes the jockey tightens the hame strap and then gets into the coach box? Have you ever seen a hame strap?" "Yes." "What's it like?" "Leave me alone, you're nuts." "Have you ever seen a coach box or been to the races?" "You don't have to go everywhere," cried Lepus. "Pushkin wrote poems about Turkey without ever having been there." "Oh yes, Erzurum is in Tula province, of course." Lepus did not appreciate the sarcasm. He continued heatedly, "Pushkin wrote for material he read. He read the history of the Pugachev revolt and then wrote about it. It was Entich who told me about the races." After this masterly defense, Persitsky dragged the resisting Lepus into the next room. The onlookers followed. On the wall hung a large newspaper clipping edged in black like an obituary notice. "Did you write this piece for the Captain's Bridge?" "Yes, I did." "I believe it was your first attempt at prose. Congratulations." The waves rolled across the pier and fell headlong below like a jack. "A lot of help to the Captain's Bridge you are." "The bridge won't forget you for some time." "What's the matter?" "The matter is, do you know what a jack is?" "Of course I know. Leave me alone." "How do you envisage a jack? Describe it in your own words." "It sort of falls." "A jack falls. Note that, everyone. A jack falls headlong. Just a moment, Lepus. I'll bring you half a ruble. Don't let him go." But this time, too, there was no half-ruble forthcoming. Persitsky brought back the 21st volume of the Brockhaus Encyclopedia. "Listen, jack, a machine for lifting heavy weights. A simple jack used for lifting carriages, etc., consists of a mobile toothed bar gripped by a rod which is turned by means of a lever." And here, in 1879, John Dixon set up the obelisk known as Cleopatra's Needle by means of 4 workers operating 4 hydraulic jacks. And this instrument, in your opinion, can fall headlong. So Brockhaus has deceived humanity for 50 years. Why do you write such rubbish instead of learning? Answer. "I need the money." "But you never have any. You're always trying to catch half rubles." "I bought some furniture and went through my budget." "And how much furniture did you buy? You get paid for your pot boilers as much as they're worth, a kopeck." "A kopeck be damned. I bought a chair at an auction which—" "Is it sort of like a snake?" "No, from a palace. But I had some bad luck. Yesterday when I arrived back from—" "Hina Chleks," cried everyone present in one voice. "Hina? I haven't lived with Hina for years. I was returning from a discussion on Malachowski. I went in, the window was open. I felt at once something had happened." "Dear, dear," said Persitsky, covering his face with his hands. "I feel, comrades, that Lepus's greatest masterpiece has been stolen. Gavrila had a job as doorman. Gavrila used to open doors."
Let me finish. Absolute vandalism. Some Rexer just gotten into the apartment and ripped open the entire chair covering. Could anyone lend me 5 rubles for the repairs?
Compose a new Gavrilla for the repairs. I'll even give you the beginning. Wait a moment. Yes, I know. Gavrilla hastened to market. Gavrilla bought a rotten chair. Write it down quickly. You can make some money on that in the Chest of Drawers Gazette. Oh, Trubetskoy. Anyway, why are you called Trubetskoy? Why don't you choose a better name? Nicky for Dolgoruki, or Nikifor Valois, or still better, Citizen Nicky for Sumarokov Elston. If ever you manage to get some easy job, then you can write 3 lines for Garrison right away, and you have a marvelous way to save yourself. One piece of rubbish is signed Sumarokov, the second Elston, and the third Yusupov. God, you hack!